The fact that people are still talking about the Joker movie is really testament to how occultic it is. Now, when a film, one of the biggest when you see things like sites like Vigilant Citizen and others who try to unmask occult symbolism in films, they always get it wrong. Because when they put obvious occult messages inside a film, the occult symbolism that you're picking up on is already inert. It has no more power, it has no charge, so you're losing your mind over something that's essentially dead. I'll give you a good example of a real occult movie and a fake inertia occult movie. The first two Godfather movies are loaded with occult symbolism, feelings, sensations, undercurrents. The third Godfather movie is overtly occult in that it pushes forward the whole idea of the murder of Pope John Paul I by the Vatican Bank and the Mafia. And the film flopped. The Godfather franchise had simply no more attenuation of the psyche that had any further point to play in our human development. It was over. Why? Because its self-conscious desire to be occult meant that there was no occult. This is why the current Joker film is affecting people so profoundly. And it's a true occult movie has 1,000,001 meanings and no meanings. That you cannot pin down what precisely, in any easy way, what effect it's having upon both the personal psyche of yourself and the collective consciousness as a whole. Now, the best vlog I've seen of the Joker movie so far is on Smile, Christopher on Smile Titans. He did a very good one where he talked about the analogy of Joker, Arthur, really. And Arthur, the film really should be called Arthur and not the Joker. And it's very important that he also points out that it's not called the Joker. And because in many, when you think about it, the Joker is all of us. And he talks about Arthur being compressed by the bottom and the top of society. And there's a lot of truth to that. What makes Joker so profoundly powerful is that it shows that human sacrifice is necessary for change. Joker has to sacrifice Arthur. Arthur has to sacrifice his mother. Thomas Wayne has to sacrifice himself. What I love about the Thomas Wayne character is the fact that he's not portrayed as an evil man. It's only if you have a hatred of people who are rich and successful, and that's very much put across in the film. It's only if you have a hatred of people who are rich and successful and better than you, do you have a problem with Thomas Wayne. And that is a very powerful occultic statement because it causes you to look into yourself and say, is he a bad man because he's a bad man? Or is he a bad man because I'm a failure as a man? I get that a lot in my life. I'd say a lot of the smear campaigns that are directed to me by males are often, and they're always, nearly always, by loser or insecure males who have made a monster of me because they cannot face the failure in themselves. And that's okay because that's a part of human. If they didn't recognize that, they wouldn't be able to develop from it. And I've done that in my life. When I was younger and had no money, I was kind of like to be pissed off and jealous of people who had money and success until I realized that it was, it's not their fault. It's my fault. It's the very easiest thing in the world to play the victim rather than to become the hero. And the hero is always to yourself. And this also plays into many things. This whole, when we talk about other things here, not just Joker, but comic book culture in general. Now, to me, the most pivotal scene in that movie is the part where he goes into the refrigerator. What that is the caterpillar of Arthur, and what emerges is the butterfly of Joker. That's one of the most occultic symbols that's been in the movies in recent years for a very, very long time. And remember, because your soul and your psyche reads in archetypal symbolic language, it will remember things far more profoundly and intensely because of the archetypal narrative and unspoken issuance of the concept. So Therefore, the reason why the Joker movie is affecting so many people so deeply is they really don't know. And they don't know because the film has directly communicated to their subconscious minds. Now they can sit there and quite rightly and correctly say, it's about this, or it's about the injustice in society. It's about a poor man who's, who's driven through really from child abuse and post-traumatic stress into what he became. It's a reflection of all of us. It's a reflection of society. And you can do all that, but they're important. They're important because they actually cause you to have self-realization in the truest occultic sense. Whereby the ones who say, oh, Thomas Wayne is Trump and he represents the elites, they're the most low-class, low-level consciousness types who say that. And this is why the mainstream media is absolutely terrified of that film. Terrified of it. They're frightened of it. You know the way I've been talking about truthers who are like afraid of triangles and eyes. I've actually seen them in real life look away like this when a single eye was on a TV or a poster. This is, well, the media are like that now with the reaction to Joker. They don't understand why the masses are not walking down the street wearing masks saying, and they want you to, they want people wearing those plastic masks and rioting. They want that. That's just like they wanted mass shootings. This is how sick these mainstream media people are. But they wanted that. Instead, they got something that they cannot control, which is self-reflection. This is the issue with these SJWs, these ultra-liberals, these alt-right conservative types, is that they lack self-reflection and see any growth of the self being directly connected to the metamorphosis of society towards their infantile needs, whether it be extreme right or extreme left, or somewhat right or somewhat left. The middle path is the self, and they cannot take the self on board. So therefore, everything has to be rationalized into good guys, bad guys. But you're never, even if you're a member of the elite and the establishment, you're never the bad guy. And now people are saying things like, well, the reason why the establishment hate Joker so much is because it really goes after them. No, it doesn't. The reason the establishment hate Joker so much is because it causes people to self-reflect. The most terrifying thing to the establishment of all. Most terrifying thing of all. Especially if they've cultivated a generation and a world of SJWs, right from the boomers to the millennials of today, who see everything as being solved from externally. And therefore, they develop a kind of psychic dysmorphia where they cannot in any way look to themselves for change, and it must be from outside, and it's political, and this is what keeps them dependent on the political system. It's just like those animals where you open them up and there's all parasites living underneath the animal, and it serves two purposes, like the parasites clean the skin of the animal, and then the parasites are also protected by the animal's body and mask. It's very similar to that, very similar, like those fish that live in crocodile or shark's mouths. It's very similar. And that's how they are. That's what these SJWs are. They're pecking off the teeth of the supreme predator, which is the psychopathic control grid, while pretending to be detached from it, which they are biologically and physically and psychologically, but they're very much dependent upon the viciousness of the control system in order to stay within the jaws. So it's a bravado based on parasitic need rather than personal or social or collective power. And this is really what disturbs people with the Joker, because the Joker also represents a metamorphosis, or Joker represents a metamorphosis within Western society right now. A very profound one, I might add. Now, in the context of the whole comic book culture, this is also important. The Marvel, let's look at the history of comic books in America. You had, of course, the Marvel and the DC franchise, which rose to be the prominent players. There's a book called The 10-Cent Plague about the early history of comics in the United States. It was a big influence on me when it first came out, and it showed how comic books developed from the scum of publishing, the scum of printing, printers who used to print pornography or things like that, having extra reams of paper, and they used to print these 10-cent comics on them. the comic book stories in the early days were about Joker type characters. They were about street gangs in New York killing each other and murdering each other. They were considered bad influences on the working class youth of America. They were considered the lowest of the low. Like all emerging great art forms, it's always considered filth when it first comes out and stupid. Now, by the time the World War II, or just in the post-war period, it had developed into two things, Marvel and DC. DC generally represented all American heroes with a strong propaganda element to it. So you had like the likes of Captain America and Wonder Woman were basically used as weapons against the Nazis. And they represented the American way, idealism, virtue, strength, hard work, honesty, community, and were very powerful archetypes. In many ways, Wonder Woman was Columbia personified as a kind of an S&M, Enola Gay Dolly Bird of the masses. And wasn't a powerful woman figure, was definitely there for titillation of men. And also the Captain America represented the idealized archetype of the American male. The shield also defends, but the shield also attacks. And the star, of course, being very occultic at the center of that. And then Batman represented a belief that the authority figures were going to protect you from the scum of the urban decay. That's what Batman was. The shadow of Gotham City is the shadow of the Wayne's success. And that included the murder of the parents. And Bruce Wayne's only power is the fact that he has his parents' money. But he's also at war with himself. And this was the beginning of DC as being much more than a flash in the pan superhero type experience. There was something deeper going on. It was creeping into the zeitgeist of the DC world, not overtly, but it was there nonetheless. And of course, then the Batman TV show came out in the 60s and completely destroyed that because it was probably getting too deep at that point. A Dark Knight Batman would have been the worst thing for America during the Vietnam War era. That would have been awful. Now, of course, during the Vietnam War era, Marvel came to the fore. Marvel's superheroes were generally less like gods and more like people. They were shy around girls. They were nerds, geeks. They were scientists often. They had an awful resonance of, even though we're superheroes, we're not quite right. So that was also offset by humor. Marvel had lots of humor. And that was the kind of two strands of American comic books that developed, although they did swap and change their kind of the concepts. By the time the 1980s had come along, and you had influences of British comics like Judge Dredd, American Marvel and DC started to get both kind of darker and merge. Now, you found that the DC they brought in better writers, better artists, and it just became better products, both of them, a more mature and developed product overall. Movies then came from that, and we all know the story. I'm not going to go into the history of the Marvel and DC movie thing, but let's just talk about where we are now. Marvel films are a catastrophe. Marvel itself is a catastrophe. The Endgame was an absolute horror show. It was so bad. The killing off of Iron Man was it was one of the most ridiculous things. The passing of the baton of Captain America and other characters to minorities, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, was basically a franchise that was desperately trying to market to an audience because it had lost its psychic strength among the people who keep you in business. For instance, if I was offered mainstream and I was called up tomorrow and says, will you go on Oprah? Will you go on Larry King? Will you go on Ellen? I would immediately, and just like when I was offered mainstream in Ireland 10 years ago, I said no, because I'm playing for the long game. I'm here to serve the people that I was when I was growing up, the scum. Okay, I'm not calling you lot scum. I'm just saying you're not the ones who fit into society. I'm playing for the long game because I've learned enough to know that long-term survivability and vitality is based upon not playing to the masses. Marvel went and completely played to the masses, and doing this only made them as powerful as the product they could deliver. Therefore, Infinity Wars was surprisingly a good film. It had all the best elements of Marvel. It had personality depth in characters. It had lots of humor, and humor that worked very well. It had the right kind of action sequences, and it worked. Where Endgame was an absolute catastrophe that went for when. Oh, here, let me tell you something about American culture. When American culture has failed, when American culture has flopped, let me say something first. When Irish cultural tropes have failed, and when Irish cultural tropes have flopped, they revert to self-analysis in the most tacky way. So therefore, you'll find that the people in Ireland who represent the culture at the lowest, most least intelligent level will talk about the Catholic Church, the English, and the famine, and this kind of thing. Therefore, let's talk about someone like Sinead O'Connor. If you find an Irish person who's at the top of the cultural chain, you will get a surrealism, Samuel Beckett, James Joyce, etc., etc. In America, if you have someone who's highly culturally developed, you'll get the likes of Tennessee Williams. You'll get the likes of William Burroughs. You'll get the likes of, I'm sure there's loads of things. Stanley Kubrick, okay? When you have the lowest development of American culture representing itself as a reflection of the necessary, should we say, superficial healing zeitgeist, what you get is fucking schmaltz, okay? Schmaltz. That's if you wanted to say, people say that the worst thing about America is imperialism. The worst thing about America is their narcissism and boasting of how great they are. The Americans boasting about being number one and great is one of their greatest attributes as a people, because they don't say only Americans are allowed to come to have this experience. They say anyone can be part of this experience. It's just that we've encapsulated that as America. And that's actually when people say to me like, oh, Americans are so full of themselves and boastful. That's one of their attributes. It's Europeans, well, particularly the English in particular, don't understand this because they don't see that that's not built on narcissism. It's built on self-belief. When Americans are very, what's the word? Supportive of one another. Irish and British people are not. There's a lot of begrudgery here. If someone makes it, they say, "Oh, the fuck did he do? What's he up to?" Over there, they say, "Well done. Go. I want to emulate you." So that's a good thing about America. But the worst thing about America is fucking schmaltz. They will reduce everything at the worst level to schmaltz. I was up in Salem, and the Salem witch trials were about brutal murder of a minority, and they have statues there in bronze of Tabitha from Bewitched. Fucking schmaltz. They have the Vietnam War era. When they really got proper about the reflection on it, you have things like the Deer Hunter, right? Then later on, you get films about fellas coming back, and they're all like, I love my dad. I love my dad. Forrest Gump, fucking schmaltz. They reduce a horrible disease like AIDS that tore thousands of young men apart in the 1980s to the streets of Philadelphia. Fucking schmaltz. A great movie that was amazing. The one with Tom Cruise where he was on the island, where that's where he's with the basketball Wilson and everything. Fantastic. Gets back to America. Fucking schmaltz. That's what kills art and culture in America. Schmaltz, okay? And that's what happened at the end of Endgame. You had this ridiculous battle at the end that was just like, those Chinese restaurants where you pay one fee and you can get all the thing, as much as you want to eat off the buffet. Well, that's what Endgame was at the end of the big battle. Here's your fucking buffet, right? And it flopped completely. It looked stupid. There was an unnecessary, pointless battle with Thanos that just didn't work, really. involving Captain America and Iron Man. And then, all the chicks come in and save the day, this crap. And I'm not saying the chicks can save the day, but it's just, it was pandering, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then it finishes with the final half hour of fucking schmaltz, okay? Schmaltz, okay? When they've produced the schmaltz, they've lost the plot. They've lost the product. They have lost the energy. And so you now have this thing now where Marvel is under control of people who don't know what they're doing. Apparently one tried to murder his wife the other day. That's how bad it is. And they've lost their way, and schmaltz is the currency of the damned. That's what that is. And the schmaltz was like, you know, Iron Man going back to see his old days in the military and all this stuff, and comes back as an old man, and then he gives his shield to this black dude, and now we have the whole thing. It's all been passed on to minorities, right? First of all, okay, what Marvel handing over all their archetypal roles to minorities is first, it's a money grabbing exercise. That's all that is. So don't, you'll have all these wankers from Marvel and all these movie reviewers saying Marvel has come of age. It incorporates and it shares with man. I even had that like when Endgame was on, all these SJWs were going, you must support this movie, you must support this movie, and all this kind of thing, right? Bullshit. And because people of color win in the end and all this stuff, and they don't. What this is when slavery ended in America, who had the slaves in America? The super rich, right? What did happen when slavery happened? They took all the African American people that were working for them, and they said, Kunta Kinte, your name is now, and I don't mean that to be disparaging, I'm just using that as a metaphor. Kunta Kinte, your name is now Flavius Jackson, because my name is Jackson, and your name is Flavius Jackson. Mondingo Mosafa, whatever your name is, whatever woman's name is, you're now Sarah Jefferson, because my name is Jefferson Jackson Washington, Flavius Washington, Cassius Jackson. That's exactly what Marvel are doing. And that's why the SJWs love it, because their ancestors would have been the ones who had all the slaves too on the plantations in the deep south and in the mid Atlantic states, picking cotton, making them all rich so they don't have to work today. And that's what they're doing. They're saying, your new name is Captain America. Your new name is Valkyrie. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. They couldn't be arsed hooking up with someone like Black Entertainment Network or some other group like that, and developing proper black superheroes, African American superheroes. And you know why? The minority superheroes are unnecessary, because minorities have real superheroes. Muhammad Ali, Bruce Lee, Pele, Maradona. It goes on and on and on. Endless, right? They have real life superheroes. So they don't need the plantation owners at Marvel to develop superheroes for them, or to give them their names. Here you go, Cassius Captain America. Here you go, Flavius Valkyrie. That's what they're doing, okay? Marvel is dead. It is dead. And its epitaph was written by the movie Joker. And that's really what you're watching today. You're watching a schism between real America, okay? Real America. It's the soul of America, which is represented by Joker. And and I'm not saying it's a negative thing. That's actually a transformative metamorphosis thing. That's the greatness of America. To when it does, things don't work, they do fix themselves. Representing Schmaltz America, Marvel, Avengers Endgame, right? The SJWs jump onto failing Schmaltz America, and this is the most important occulting message of this video. This meandering long video, which I'm sure I'm bored the shit out of you with, is that don't bother yourself worrying about these super liberals, these progressives, these SJWs, just like the witches who had the hexes in Brooklyn. they're not going to be around much longer, because what's happened to Marvel represents the inertia of what they represent. We're going to see a new America emerge, and America, being the guiding light of the West at the moment, will help rejuvenate the United States as a whole and the world as a whole, giving it forward new cultures. This was the punk Joker was, and I say this in all sincerity, the psychic punk rock we needed for years and years. And I think 2020 is going to be an absolutely amazing year as it unfolds, as an opening doorway to a great new cultural thing. The sheeple, and I hate to use that word, but you know, the meat golems, the SJWs, who are just another form of meat golem, they have no future. They have no future, because what's going to happen is the social future is bleak. Look after yourself and your loved ones, and thrive internally, culturally, and in your psyche. Just because the world that the establishment is developing is bleak doesn't mean that you have to be as bleak and bland. Let them die in their fucking schmaltz. Thank you.